what's that? That's Jodrell Bank. And what goes on at Jodrell Bank, nobody knows. It was a big secret, and then the cat out of the bag when Sputnik, I think it was some fellow on television said, Jodrell Bank has picked up the first signal from the Russian satellite Sputnik. It went like this.
Which is actually true. It was Jodrell Bank that discovered that Russia was ahead of USA in the space race.
In the space race, that was great.
Jodrell Bank had to phone America and tell them the Russians were beaten to it.
Beat the Americans, and it was just down the road. It was near Macclesfield. So
Macclesfield at Paris out.
So that was like, not only was it mysterious, it was kind of like scientific as well. So to a young lad, that's quite an attraction. So we want to go on bike rides. You have to navigate by Jodrell Bank. I could tell how lost I was by how close I was to the beach.
Did you come here on school trips or?
Oh, compulsory, yeah. We used to come to school trips. We come and my dad had a thing about there's a farm shop. I think he liked the lady who sold the potatoes. It's true. And we'd come here on Sunday afternoons and, like go and they'd let you mess about.
You came to Jodrell Bank to buy a potato?
Yeah, they used to buy potatoes from the shop. And we'd come in here and they used to let you mess about, them little ones, baby Jodrell Bank ones. You could mess about with it. You had a joystick in it.
Hang on a minute. You just turned up on Sunday afternoon to buy potatoes and then they let you mess around with the telescope?
Come in! It was very laissez-faire in those days. No, obviously not. No, we had open days, but I can always remember it being a Sunday and we bought potatoes and we'd come in. But I particularly remember that, right, I'm going to point the dish at the sun to see what happens. And absolutely nothing happened. The fellow just said, here's your piece of paper. And it was just a piece of paper with loads of wiggly lines off it. It didn't mean anything at all, but I thought, I discovered an alien race possibly, and it would only take a matter of minutes before I was dragged off to the secret place where they keep the aliens, but they never did.
Never showed you the aliens?
Never, not to this day. They've never shown me the aliens. Should have to come in all these times.
So tell me about, when you go over Macclesfield, tell me what around here, what was the musical climate around here? Did you always gravitate to Manchester, or does Macclesfield have a certain different musical taste, or?
No, I think he always ended up, going to in the 70s. You had to go to Manchester. There were tales of Screaming Lord Sutch playing the El Rio Club in Macclesfield, and there was the Beatles played in Macclesfield once. The van broke down on Chestergate. Our Charlie pushed it. But that was just a legend. After that, you had to get the train, or you had to get a mate who had some wheels to take to Manchester. That was where it happened.
So how did you used to get to Manchester when you were a teenager and started first going to gigs? Did you get the train, or?
That I missed the end of many a great gig by getting the train, and I found the shortest way back to Piccadilly. Missed every encore by every band that ever played there. Yeah.
What were those early gigs? What were the first gigs you were going to in Manchester in the sort of mid-70s?
The first gig I went to, which was actually slightly connected with this place, was Hawkwind, which is a Tammy Hawkwind story, because my dad he didn't like the records that I played, and I didn't like the records that he played, so he said, well, all right, you take me to one of your bands and you can come see Duke Ellington with me. So I said, right, we'll go and see Hawkwind then. So we all trooped off like we were going to the Towns Women's Guild.
And you were what, 14?
Yeah.
Was it at Bellevue?
No, it was at the Free Trade Hall.
All right.
All the best gigs were at the Free Trade Hall.
Yeah.
Supported by Status Quo.
Supported by Status Quo?
Supported by Status Quo, yeah. And it was all going swimmingly until the Stacey, the dancer, took her top off. We're leaving!
So the Free Trade Hall, for those who don't know, is a venue in Manchester. There used to be, it's now unfortunately a Radisson Hotel, but there used to be two venues in there. The Free Trade Hall and the lesser Free Trade Hall was a smaller, upstairs, a smaller venue. And I think I'm right in saying that it's the only building in the UK that's named after a movement, the Free Trade Hall.
Free Trade Hall is, yes, that's right.
So it's famous for several gigs. The first one is in 1967, 86, I think. Am I right saying? Yeah, it is, because it's 50th anniversary this year. When Bob Dylan played there, and famously he played the first half of the gig acoustic, and then came back on and he just turned electric, and he plugged in as he started to play the second half of the gig. Someone in the audience started shouting, "Judas!"
My mate Parsley said it was him. Don't think it was.
And then 10 years after that, the other famous gig that was at that venue, which you were famously at.
No, I wasn't.
You were there?
No, I was watching the air that night.
There was a band, two kids from Bolton Institute of Art and Design, I think, called Howard Devoto and Pete Shelley, had heard about this thing called punk music. They'd read about it in the NME. This is when, now it's ridiculous, you can read about music everywhere, but I'm old enough to remember when you could only read about the music in the NME, and you had to wait every week to read about music. So anyway, they'd heard about this band called the Sex Pistols, and they were thinking about starting their own band, which they did and became Buzzcocks. And they booked them to play the Lesser Free Trade Hall, that became this infamous gig.
Legendary, yeah.
So, how did you hear about the gig?
Obviously, I didn't. I would have been there.
You went to the second one, didn't you?
Never.
All right, I didn't realise.
Sorry, never seen Sex Pistols.
So anyway,
Sex on telly.
All right. So anyway, this famous gig where only about 40 people, but all the people who went on to form the
bands,
form the bands, including the members of Joy Division, apart from Steve.
Yeah, of course.
Mick Hucknall, who was in a band called the Frantic Elevators at that time.
Yeah.
Stephen Patrick Morrissey, Marky Smith of the Fall, Tony Wilson.
Tony Wilson was there, yeah.
Yeah, as he would tell everyone. Yeah. So these three members of Joy Division who were there, who didn't only some and Dee Hook knew each other. They didn't know Ian Curtis.
No.
But at that time, there was only sort of a small nucleus of people who were going to gigs around town. So were you aware of each other?
No, that's a strange thing. I went to school with Ian, but I never knew him. And we went.
Did you know him by sight or?
No.
Right.
I just kept my head down at school. What you do when you're naughty. No, but everybody went to the same gigs, but for some reason we never bumped into each other. And I came across Ian by answering the advert on Jones's music shop window, drummer wanted. So I just turned up at his house and it was like, oh yeah, I was at that gig. Oh, I was at that gig. Oh yeah, you went to the same school as me. Yeah, were you the one that got kicked out? Yes, it was.
And so they were already kind of Warsaw by then?
Yeah, they were Warsaw, yeah.
And did you play little bands by then?
Yeah. Most of them only lasted an afternoon. There was one that lasted a couple of weeks. Well, there was one that lasted nearly a month. So that was nearly successful.
And when the four of you came together, did it feel quite different?
Yeah, it did. Yeah, it did. You could tell that we kind of fitted together in a sort of like misfit-y kind of way. That as soon as we started playing, because usually when I started playing, people say, "Hang on." No, not like that. Can you do it a bit quieter? They seem to quite like.
So where were your rehearsal studios at that time? Where would you?
Well, we started off. First one was in Abraham Moss at Crumpsall. Then we just doing the upstairs rooms of pubs until we got kicked out. And then the first place where we got a semi-permanent bass was T.J. Davidson's studio, which was on Little Peter Street, just around the corner from the Cylinder.
Which you had for quite a while, didn't you? Because the famous videos for Lovell Terrace Apart is filmed in there, isn't it?
That's right, yeah, in the room which appears black, which was actually the worst shade of brown.
Which actually looks like beautiful and atmospheric in that video, but yourself and Bernard have told me that it was actually horrible.
It was horrible.
It was freezing.
Yeah, it was horrible. It was terrible. That's why when we became New Order, we moved out to the underground rehearsal next to the graveyard. Because we went somewhere area.
If any of you were here for the if any of you were here for the previous talk with Dubs, they then took over the rehearsals.
We tried to palm it off on them.
Why did you decide to have a rehearsal studio next to a graveyard in Crumpsall?
Kismet. It's just one of those things, fate decreed we had to have this. It seemed to be quite a good place behind the gas board and between the gas board and the cemetery. It seemed ideal because nobody knew where it was, apart from sort of later people shooting up and a prostitute.
And that was just the band.
That was just the band.
So the musical transition from Joy Division to New Order, obviously a lot of people think of Joy Division as more guitar orientated and New Order as more electronic, but that transition was happening before, really, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Joy Division.
Yeah, very early on. I think Bernard bought a kit synth because that's what you couldn't actually afford the synthesizer.
Bernard's first synthesizer. He built it himself.
Well,
you built it for him.
No, I can't. Well, he can actually solder, but I think
it was a kit. You used to buy synthesizers like an Airfix kit or something that you.
It was a bit more rough and ready than an Airfix kit. The instructions didn't entirely make sense. Yeah, it was a kit, and this guy helped him out when it didn't work quite as well as he expected. But it was a great synth. Yeah, it was really good. Then when we got a sequencer out of the kit, and I trying to keep up with the Joneses, got a drum synthesizer because I thought it'd make me fantastic.
But this was also a time before MIDI, which is basically MIDI is how different electronic instruments speak to each other, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean that was.
But this was before MIDI, and sort of some of those sounds on those early records are kind of accidental because the machines hadn't really worked out how to speak to each other yet. Is that right?
No. Well, I mean, that was a great thing about it, was how you got all the boxes to talk to each other. I mean, you got the sequencer and you got a synthesizer. How does it work? Because they didn't tell you about things like that. I mean, you'd seen Kraftwerk, but you'd no idea actually how it worked. And the sequencer talked a language called hexadecimal, which, if you smoked enough pot, made sense, but very rarely did. Yeah, it was a bit hit and miss. I mean, all of it was you could get fantastic sounds, but they were that was it. They were a moment in time.
And the other thing about these early electronic machines is that they had no memory. They had the memory of like a watch or a pocket calculator.
Yeah.
So you had to actually do it by step programming.
Yeah, I mean the one we did with Monday on it was kind of like Morse code. You'd go to do like the shortest note, you'd have to go dit, and then and if you lost counts halfway through, you had to go all the way back to the beginning and start again. That's what I mean. Gillian used to do all that. We wrote it down. In the end, it kept forgetting that many times. We wrote it down on a piece of graph paper. X 0 0 0. And I've got this big scroll, and that was how we had to do it because it just forgot.
And also storing it on the old big floppy disks. If anyone remembers those.
We had big floppy disks, and the little sequencer that we had stored it on tiny little cassettes that looked like they were from a dictaphone. They thought, well, they'll be cheap, but no, they weren't the ones from a dictaphone. They were like very, very special ones. If you thought, oh, I've got one of them, you put it in, it wouldn't work. It might work once, and in the middle of the gig, it wouldn't. So you had to get these really, really rare, almost dictaphone mini cassettes. Wow. Stupid.
And am I right in thinking this is a famous story that you were using the big floppy disks and Peter Sattel, who was the designer who designed a lot of Factory Records and New Order and Joy Division's covers, he came into the studio once and picked it up and just said, "What's this?"
That's right, yes. We just got the emulator, which was like one of the first samplers, and we recorded farts and all sorts on it. We go, oh, this is great. Motorbikes, look it please. But Savile was here, oh, what's this? And can I have it? Yeah, go on, have it. It's got a motorbike on it. Take it home. And then, to my surprise, he turned it into a record sleeve.
The artwork for Blue Monday, which is it has cutouts on it, like a.
That was that's where we went wrong.
But not knowing that Blue Monday was going to be the biggest selling 12-inch of all time, Factory Records and their infinite wisdom didn't do the calculations of how much this cover was going to cost, and you ended up losing 10p on every copy that's sold or something?
Logic dictates if you cut something out of something, it'll cost less than the thing that had the actual thing in the first place, obviously. So we thought we were saving money. But we didn't realise that we'd have to pay somebody to do the scissoring. And that was where it all went wrong.
Can we just talk a little bit about the Hacienda as well?
Yeah.
Because the Hacienda, I'm sure most of you know, the famous nightclub in Manchester, which opened in 1982, 21st of May 1982, I think.
It was something like that.
Yeah. And it was basically at that time, unlike now where lots of people go to New York and everyone knows New York, at that time nobody managed to go to New York. But you were, and going to start recording with people like Arthur Baker, and you've been to these amazing nightclubs like Danceteria and the Fun House in New York, Paradise Garage, that none of us even heard of. And you decided to build a version of that in Manchester.
Yeah, nobody actually told us we were building a version of that. We were
Right, so Anthony Wilson and Bob Breton decided to build a version of it with your money.
Yeah. Maybe I just thought it was going to be a club. You know, it's a dingy little place somewhere, and they said, "Oh, we've got a place for the club. Where is it?" International Marine, which was like before it was a club. It sold boats.
It was a yacht showroom.
Yacht showroom.
I still find it quite bizarre that Manchester has a yacht showroom.
That was the thing. It was like Jodrell Bank. It was a mysterious place. You drive past it. I thought, how can you sell boats? How did they get there? Where did they keep them?
Where are you going to use them? It's just like on Bullseye when people who lived on a council estate in Doncaster used to win a speedboat.
It was what you could have won. A speedboat, yeah. I know, so it's mystery, and said, all right. And I thought they actually hadn't got the building and just gone to have a look round it. So it's like, oh my God, it's quite big, isn't it? Are we just having the little bit downstairs? No, everywhere.
And were you involved in the sort of design of it and stuff? Because they got an architect in called Ben Kelly.
Yeah.
And his design was quite revolutionary, but quite expensive.
Of course, yeah. But for some reason, they seem to have a lot of money at that time.
This is the time when most of factory's money is coming from New Order, but New Order are on about £50 a week or something.
On a good week, yeah. So they've already got a lot of money, haven't they? Rob said, well, one thing about doing this club, it'd be a good way of getting money out of factory. And he never actually said where this money was going, so it ended up in the Hacienda.
And obviously, it was a little bit quiet for the first few years, but still had some amazing gigs in there.
Quiet? There's tumbleweed blowing across the dance floor. Yeah.
And basically, when times were hard, you had to go and play a gig there.
That's why we were there every week playing. It was embarrassing because we go and rehearse, coming back from the graveyard, feeling a bit depressed. Let's cheer ourselves up, go for the Hacienda for a last drink, and go in here. After queuing up, but admittedly there was only
there
was only us in the queue.
Everyone else suddenly guessed this, and you were queuing.
Where is everyone? And they're just solely at the bar. It's a bit quiet, a fill up later on. We never did.
5 years later on.
5 years later on, yeah. We never lost faith.
And did you see that coming? Because this was basically the sort of 87, 88, Acid House suddenly hit Manchester, Ecstasy hit Manchester, which obviously played an important part. And did you see that coming? When it
was a bit, we didn't not really see. You could see something coming. It's the same way with punk. You could feel it happening, like aftershocks and reverse. You could see that something was going to happen, but I had no idea it was going to be as massive as that. In fact, when it really took off, we were actually in Ibiza.
Recording Fine Sound?
Recording Fine Sound. It's really going up at the Hacienda. There's loads of people in it. It's just down the road, all this Hacienda. So, let's go and waste some money.
And unfortunately at that time, people were having a real hedonistic halcyon days time in the Hacienda, but they were imbibing something that wasn't for sale in the Hacienda. So even though people were having an amazing time in the club, and like incredible, life-changing time, you still weren't making any money because you weren't selling any booze. No one was drinking.
We can have some water. Yeah, it's fine. But I mean, I never got a free. I never thought of asking for water. I just thought, I'll have half a shandy. That'll be £16, sir. Isn't there a book or something? No. Mr. Sumner says you're buying his drinks as well.
And so, but how did that change the music? You talk about Fine Time. How did that Acid House Revolution change the music of the band? I mean, because you've been going to New York for a long time before that, in America, you kind of soaked up all those influences already.
Yeah. I mean, technically it's a funny record in that it was kind of done in that environment, but when you listen to it, apart from Fine Time and like a couple of little bits, it's not really that much of it. It's a great record, but it's not really an Acid House record. No. It's got some great tracks on it. It's just somehow it's got the atmosphere of the times sort of seeped into it because we were
partying.
I think
is the correct term.
I mean, you always deny what's a song about. Oh, it's not about anything, but songs are always about what you're going through, and that was what we were going through.
And am I right in thinking that you had like several legendary parties in Ibiza while you were recording, and half of Manchester were over there with you?
I forget. Well, there was the barbecue, the Club 1830 barbecue that we did every Thursday, where we bring people from Ibiza town. Here's a rock band recording, and there was that. And there was a lot of partying there. I mean, the only reason we went to Ibiza was because it had a swimming pool, which is like very, very important in the making.
Isn't that a swimming pool in Macclesfield?
No, I mean, so many recording studios forget how important the swimming pool is. We ended up at Pete Gabriel's studio, Real World, and me and Rob went to have a look at it. It's brilliant. It's like got all this high-tech gear and everything. So I don't care how much high-tech gear it's got. It's not got a swimming pool. So we ended up in Ibiza.
So, talking of recording studios, your last record was recorded just around the corner. A lot of it. Your house.
Yeah.
You now have a recording studio in your barn.
You can make records anywhere. No, I mean the whole thing about the